JB, plenty of games this week. Some conferences not quite in league play yet. A couple of them are, though, and we're going to point out who's who and what's what. Granted, if you have more than 8 teams in your league, you've got to be in conference play at this point. But a lot of games to go through. We're going to go through those games, some interviews from the weekend, and look at the standings as well. What are your opening thoughts, though, on the weekend?
Well, there was about 30 games across the East region, and at this point you can say we're kind of through what some coaches refer to as the first quarter of the football season. As you said, there's a lot of out-of-conference games that get played, but then certain conferences that have larger rosters, so to speak, get underway. So we've got a lot to cover. Might as well just jump in and talk about Week 4.
Let's go to Crunch Time for September 22nd, 2018. And we're going to start with the CCC, and it's no mistake that Hobart is going to be one of the first teams we talk about because they lost a game to a CCC team. The first time Endicott has beaten them, 27-24. They held Hobart to 19 rushing yards and intercepted twice the Hobart quarterback, Hoffman. JB, watched that game briefly. What happened?
Yeah, this is a tough pill to swallow, I'm sure, for Coach DeWall and the Statesman staff. I mean, he was basically beaten by all the players that he recruited at Endicott, and really, they shut down the running attack and made the Statesman one-dimensional, jumping out to a 17-0 lead early on. And although Hobart battled back, never really could do anything defensively. They allowed over 400 yards, made Endicott look, their quarterback looked like an All-American on Saturday. So tough loss for Hobart. They're going to have to go home, kind of lick their wounds, and get ready to play a surging Union squad in 2 weeks in the Liberty League home opener.
Congratulations to Coach McGonigal on that win. I know that one probably tasted really good for him on the flip side of it. Okay. Nichols 43, Alfred State 7, 256 yards passing for Pena and 3 touchdowns. Lawrence had 12 tackles as well. And Western New England with 576 total yards of offense, 59-7 over Anna Maria. That's a great offensive showing for a team that has had some offensive struggles at times this season. Let's move to the ECSC. Only one game to talk about here. Dean beating Becker 42-15, and yet the Bulldogs had trailed 15-6 with 6:33 remaining in the second quarter. And what was that? Basically 36 straight points reeled off by Dean, who this time their comeback is for a win. A couple other times this season they just couldn't pull it out. This time they get the win.
Close, but yeah. You have to give the Bulldogs credit. They've been in pretty much every game that they've played all season. Finally get the win over Becker, a CCC team. So local rival there, you could say. And so congrats to Dean on their first win.
Let's look at the Empire 8 on Friday. They moved the game up for weather reasons. SUNY Morrisville 34, St. Lawrence 26, and overall good game. It's just when you look at the injury bug, unfortunately for St. Lawrence, Groshot had left the game for concussion protocol in the fourth quarter. That's one to watch as they're going to be facing Thomas More coming up soon. SUNY Morrisville, they've had a struggle this season, but that's a very big win for them now to try to head into Empire 8 play. Also, let's look at this game. This is one you can't just look past. Alfred 38, Cortland 33. 2 front runners we thought coming into the season for the Empire 8. And Alfred ends up with, 5 interceptions of Cortland to win this game?
Yeah, ultimately it was the turnovers that did in the Red Dragons. I mean, they kept fighting back, but the punt returned for a touchdown, and a nice day by running back Nasir Smith with 143 rushing yards and a touchdown was just enough to give the Saxons the win. I mean, Portland pulled their starting quarterback at some point, but his successor didn't fare much better. So really big day for the Saxons defense as they get back. I believe now they're 2-1 on the season and getting ready to make a run.
Let's go to the Liberty League. A couple of games we want to feature here. First, Union 49, Curry 6. Game that we thought would be tighter than this, but instead there's 7 touchdowns scored by the Dutchman. Will Bellamy, 17 for 26 for 221 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Ike Iribor 14 carries, 125, 3 touchdowns. There's most of your touchdowns at least. And 3 turnovers for the Dutchman defense. This team means business right now, JB.
Yeah, they have some of the best skill players that we've seen in a while, especially as freshmen. Iribor has really come on strong as a running back. We've already talked about Andre Ross Jr., the wide receiver. He had a touchdown in this game. Kind of more of a quiet game for him than he's had in the past couple of weeks, but still a lot of talent on this Union squad. They're going to be idle next week until they travel to Hobart for the Liberty League opener.
We let the secret out about Ross. That's what happened there. St. John Fisher loses to Ithaca 21-14. Fisher had not played in 3 full weeks before this game. Started slow, then carried themselves into the second half and had a chance to tie or win the game late. But Ithaca able to intercept at the end. And Wahid Nabi had 246 yards passing, but 2 interceptions. He's got to clean that up, but the defense seems to save the day again for Ithaca, like we had talked to Coach Swanstrom last week and discussed that very topic with him, and he's very confident in that defense.
Yeah, for sure. They definitely pulled out the stops, and they kept Fisher sort of shut out, at least in the first half. They tried to come back, but ultimately it was a couple of touchdowns. Once again, Isaiah DeHady, not a ton of yards, but had 2 scores in critical parts of the game to help Ithaca get the win over the Cardinals.
RPI moves to 4-0 for the first time since 2008. They win over Buffalo State 44-14. Boy, that game looked a lot better in the schedule, let's say in the preseason, than now, because Buffalo State is just struggling. And Emory and Henry 52, U of R 17. The Yellow Jackets trailed 38-0 at the half, just having a tough go of against some teams out of conference this year, although, as you know, they do have a win on the board from last week. The MAC, MAC action here we'll go to now. FDU Florham, the game that I attended, this was really a good game in the end. Lycoming beats FDU Florham 27-21, but FDU Florham had a chance at the end of the game twice on 4th down in the red zone and could not convert either time. You got to look at Elijah Shemory, the freshman quarterback, 242 yards and 3 touchdowns, 2 of them to Nick Costello. We'll talk to them later in the show if you're watching the actual full episode here. But you watched that game along with me a little bit, and you had to be impressed by Lycoming's ability to sort of hold on to that lead. Their defense, like we suggested coming into this game, that's what really solidified that win.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a slugfest from early on, I think, Frank. I mean, you were there in person, but it was sort of a defensive battle just from the get-go, and a little sluggish starts for both teams, I think. But they definitely rallied for an exciting finish, and, yeah, you have to credit the Warriors for hanging in there at the end and making the plays to preserve the win.
Del Val had to pull away a little bit later than you would think they would against Alvernia. It was a little bit close early on, but then it became 41-10. 13 tackles for loss by the Aggies defense in that game. Misericordia with a winning streak here now. 47-45 over Wilkes, and Williams' 339 yards and 4 touchdowns had a lot to do with that in a shootout where Wilkes quarterback Tabora had 410 yards and 3 touchdowns. Whole lot of passing going on in that game.
Yeah, no. I think it was over 1,082 yards of total offense in that one, Frank. So not a ton of defense, but another close call for Coach Strock and company. Came up a little bit short, but hey, 2 in a row for the Cougars. They're on a roll.
Stevenson 38, Kings 17. That Kings team, you just don't know which one you get week to week, it seems like. And Widener 69 to Albright 0. That one we didn't see coming because Widener seems to do the opposite of what we expect every week, because I don't know what's going on there. But Google that, folks. That was a big win for them. Let's go to the NJAC next, since it's right next door. And here's one we want to feature a little bit. Montclair State 17, Christopher Newport 14. And it was a win in overtime. Daly's 25-yard field goal is the difference. But Birch's 162 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, offset a little bit by 3 interceptions in that game. Montclair State, though, a team that we've said it week to week, they are one to watch. And you know what? They prove it right there, I think, with that win.
Yeah, the Redhawks, keep finding ways to win games. You have to credit Birch to overcome all those turnovers, because he helped lead the Redhawks down the field and tied the game with about 2:22 left in regulation. The Redhawks defense, though, made a play in the first overtime period with an interception at the goal line, and then the offense just did enough to get the ball within good distance, and Daly made the game-winning kick.
Southern Virginia beats Kane 14-9. It's anything can happen weekend in the end, Jack, it feels like. Yeah. And congratulations, Southern Virginia, on that conference win. Yeah, absolutely. It's been, 9 points scored in the games by Kane so far. We got to improve from there to have any voice in that conference right now. Salisbury 38, TCNJ 7 as the Seagulls outgain the Lions 472-156. Frostburg State 34, Rowan 7. We'll have Delane Fitzgerald join us in the show later in the week, so stay tuned for that. And Wesley 43, William Patterson 7, kind of what you would expect in that game, as Burrows went 14 for 20 for 203 and 3 touchdowns for Wesley. Newmac next.
Defensive stats in that game, though, real quick. The Wolverines only allowed 3 first downs, and 2 of them were by penalty. So really 1 first down the defense allowed, and only 43 total yards. Pretty dominant win there by the Wolverines.
Newmac, 2 games to feature here, both settled by field goal scores, at least 3 points each. Springfield 17, WPI 14. Our friend Brian McGoffin, the SID at Springfield, had texted me right as we finished up at FDU Florham, say, wow, what a gutty performance by Springfield. Hunter Belzo with 2 touchdowns, 113 yards. We'll get some interviews from that game later on if you're watching this episode on Facebook. But it's 17-14. Springfield holding on. Chad Shade's condition still not known week to week, basically, and Belzo able to pull out that win.
Yeah, he made some big plays when they needed him, especially with that last touchdown run. And ultimately, it came down to a 45-yard field goal for WPI to try to tie it, but it was blocked, and the Pride hung on for a very tough win, but keeps them in the driver's seat in the Newmac.
Coast Guard 38, Norwich 35. The Little Army-Navy game, is that what we're calling this thing, or maybe not? According to Twitter, it's all over the place.
That's what it's been called for like 60 or something years. It's been in the New York Times. It's been in a lot of publications. And I got to give the Coast Guard some love there, Frank, because their quarterback Ryan Jones went 21 for 34 with 257 yards and a touchdown, scoring the game winner with 9 seconds left on a 3-yard run. A pretty awesome, gutsy, performance in this type of, Service Academy rival game. I know we've always, talked a lot about the Secretary's Cup with the Merchant Marine, but this Norwich Coast Guard rivalry, man, maybe we've been missing out. This is definitely a game that was very exciting this weekend.
Merchant Marine Academy moves to 3-0. This is almost unheard of, not completely though. It happened one other time in the last decade. 35-14. Abbott combined for 165 total yards and 3 touchdowns for Merchant Marine. And MIT remains undefeated, 34-24 over Catholic. And that sets up a big matchup next week. Merchant Marine and MIT in Cambridge, if I'm reading the schedule correctly.
That sounds right, but you have to say, even though MIT is 4-0, Frank, they've been kind of just scraping by these last 2 weeks. They probably could have lost to Endicott in week 3. They had to come from behind to beat a winless Catholic team, so they're struggling a little bit here. It'll be interesting to see what happens when they take on the Mariners in a battle of undefeated teams in the Newmac. Let's go to the MASCAC. We're going to have to hurry up here with our last 2 conferences. UMass Dartmouth 21. And Plymouth State 16. UMass Dartmouth had gained a pretty large lead, had to hold on though, as Plymouth State scored with about a minute left and then could not recover the onside kick. But you give Corsair's quarterback, I always screw this up, Gasiach, I want to say, 20 for 30, 236 yards, 3 touchdowns, rushed for 62 yards as well. So congratulations UMass Dartmouth on a big win there against a team that we thought was going to be in the running for the MASCAC title, Plymouth State. WestCon continues to win. They moved to 3-0 for the first time since 2002 with a 40-21 win over Salve Regina. Bridgewater State 42, Fitchburg State 15. The Bears shut out the Falcons until 10:57 left in regulation on that Friday night game. Framingham State 28, Mass Maritime 13. As Wojcinski for the Rams passed for 3 touchdowns and rushed for another touchdown, overcoming 3 interceptions in that game. And Westfield State 42, Worcester State 22, as the Owls running back Holder had 149 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. The MASCAC is an interesting conference right now, to say the least, as Framingham State and WestCon seem to be lining up for a big matchup sooner rather than later in this conference, but we'll see what happens as we got stuff to play before that coming up.
Finally, NESCAC action. The closest game in the batch was Tufts beating Wesleyan 16-13. The Jumbos had their quarterback McDonald combined for 190 yards and 2 passing touchdowns in that game. And big win for Tufts over a team that dominated the previous week in Wesleyan. Just running through the scores before I get your comments on that. Trinity 59, Bates 16. 5 passing touchdowns for Visano of the Bantams. Williams 36, Colby 14. The East, Bobby Mameron had 4 rushing touchdowns in that game. Go figure that one out. Amherst 37, Hamilton 14. And closing it out, Middlebury 37, Bowdoin 24. That is it for the games, but final thoughts on the NESCAC action there.
Yeah, I mean, the Tufts win is really sort of the eye-opener because Wesleyan looked so strong in week 1 of the NESCAC season, and many had picked them as the potential NESCAC champion this year. Tufts now moving to 2-0 is trying to keep pace with Trinity, Williams, and Amherst, who are the other 2-0 teams in that league. So there'll be some more interesting games to cover here. I think right now we're sort of in the early stages, but the bigger games will be coming in the next couple of weeks, and we'll keep you covered on those.
And that is Crunchtime for the week ending September 22nd, 2018. Boy, you got to catch your breath after all that. That was a lot of action packed into about 15 minutes of coverage right there, and a lot of video clips and a lot of excitement. We'll get you more first names. We realized our notes were lacking them, but we wanted to get this show pushed to air first before we did that. So if your first name was not mentioned, we apologize. We'll get that right. Just keep putting up more stats at the end of the day. That's how you do it.
We'll get you next week.
We got lots of interviews. Let's go first to that Springfield game. 17-14 gutty performance, again, as Brian McGoffin called it in a text to me last night. And it was, indeed. And Hunter Belzo deserves credit. His team ribs him a lot, especially after a preseason interview with him. And Matt Noonan, our friend from Noontime Sports, who helps us out throughout the season and promotes our stuff as well. Thanks, Matt. We appreciate that. Caught up with Hunter, and here's what Hunter had to say.
All right, Hunter, let's just talk about that this game as a whole here, too. I mean, it came down, obviously, a final play. Your defense came up, but you, obviously, especially today, bounced back week after Union, and obviously some adversity. You were able to help overcome it.
Yeah, that game, today's game, had a lot of ups and downs. First half, we turned the ball over 2 times. You know, the defense picked us up a little bit. Second half, we came out, we played our game. That's what we did. We just... Man, I don't even know what to say. That game was crazy, but yeah, we just did what we had to do second half. Defense made big, stepped up big in the end. So,
talk about the second half here too. You guys go ahead 10-7. They get that touchdown strike. Obviously, you guys have to go down and score. It's a big 4th down play. Take me through that play. You end up, because you're going to the right, but you end up going to the left here on this play.
All right. So on that play, it was I was gonna fake the toss, roll out. We get to the line. WPI knows the play's coming. They go, he's rolling out. So I'm like, all right, let me just make a play. I seen it. Safety came up, beat him with speed to the end zone.
Coach has talked about just the brotherhood, and obviously I know that's something you guys embrace through social and obviously talk about too, but today it really was the brotherhood on both sides of the ball. Can you just talk about just not only your offense, defense, special teams? I mean, this was a 3-phase win for you guys today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just brotherhood-wise, I mean, first half I was a little frustrated. Guys came up to me, picked me up, told me, I'm going to make a big play. So, I mean, all around, our special teams played good today, and yeah, all sides of the ball, we're just there picking each other up.
Hunter, appreciate the time. Best of luck going forward.
Thank you.
Hunter Belzo, quarterback right now at least for the Springfield Pride. I think he would rather have Chad Shade back in that position, though, so he could play more of a running back position, because Chad Shade was prolific, and it's a great 1-2 punch to have there. But injuries are what they are. We'll see what happens. Let's also bring in here an interview that Matt did with Mike Cerasuolo, head coach of Springfield, and here it is.
All right, Coach, just take me through that final series here. Harrington lines up for a 45-yard field goal. Kind of take me through what you were thinking in that series.
Yeah, we had a good block all week long. Coach Marion, our special teams coordinator, has really worked hard on that group, and got probably enough pressure that it's a long kick to begin with. And I'm just really proud of the guys. The effort that they put forth all week, and then today too. I can't be more proud of these guys.
Hunter Belzo today too. Just talk about his effort. Obviously, I know a little bit difficult week coming back after the Union loss here too, but he really stepped up today for 2 big touchdowns for you.
Yeah, Hunter's. You talk about a football player. He's just a football player. We could put him anywhere, and he'd do a great job for us, and he would do it too. He's a selfless player, and just again a 1 week of practice under his belt at quarterback, and did enough to win. Really, again, really proud of the effort that every single guy in this football program put forth, because we told them all week long is that people are probably saying we're a little vulnerable right now, and we stepped up and did what we needed to do. It wasn't pretty, but it obviously we liked the result.
Last question here. Defense too was a big part of the win here too. Just talk about some big stops here. Yeah. Obviously they get the ball back. Your defense had to come up some stops. They kind of came down the way, but kind of the bend but don't break instance right there at the end there.
Yeah, defensively they were on the field a lot. We had a lot of 3-and-outs at times. We moved the ball at times a little bit, but that defense, and they played a lot of snaps, and Nick Giorgio played a ton of snaps. I don't know if he came off the field, and he did some specialists as well. So I mean, he gave everything he had for this program and this team, and that's what we told him early in the week. That's what a brotherhood is. It isn't one individual, one quarterback, or one linebacker, or safety, or anything like that. It's the entire team, and they proved that today.
Coach, congrats on the win. Best of luck going forward.
Thank you very much.
That was Mike Cerasuolo, head football coach of the Springfield Pride. And James, what's your thought? You paid attention to that game more than I was able to yesterday, obviously, because I was at FDU Florham. But, I mean, there's a team that we kind of almost left for dead with all the injuries, and we thought WPI would be a team that would really benefit from the injuries ultimately, and instead of that happening, Springfield holds on, and had to hold on and avoid a field goal from going in that would have tied the game, basically. Your thoughts on that game?
I think ultimately, even though the Engineers were able to exploit the Prides in certain respects, like Union did the week before. I mean, there was the 68-yard touchdown pass that Nyland had that gave WPI the lead early in the fourth quarter. The Springfield defense just sort of dug a little bit deeper this weekend and found ways to make the plays they needed when they needed them, and the offense churned out just enough of the clock and enough of enough yards to get the win and to hang on there. So definitely a gritty comeback win for the Pride. It keeps them in pole position with the rest of the contenders in the NUMAC, such as MIT, such as the Merchant Marine, and others. But if the Pride, they took a little step back against Union, are showing that they can still turn things around and keep fighting for that NUMAC title.
Now let's go on the road with me here, and that was at FDU Florham, as they had to try hard from a 13-point deficit to come back, and had 2 chances to do it. A missed extra point gave them the opportunity to win that game outright in regulation without needing the 2-point conversion, but they lose 27-21 to a Lycoming team that we didn't really think anything great of in terms of offense coming into this game. And then the pair that I'm about to talk to here, Elijah Shemory and Nick Costello. Elijah, we kind of called out on D3Football.com in my preview, and I asked him about that a little bit in this interview. But he gets 3 touchdowns passing and 1 interception, really balances out his numbers. He's now 6-6 basically for the season. So let's hear my interview with Elijah and Nick. Frank Rossi here with Elijah Shemory, the quarterback from Lycoming, and Nick Costello, the wide receiver who caught 2 touchdowns in a row to help his team take a 13-point lead. They had to hold on here by a 6-point win, 27-21. Let's start with Elijah. Elijah, I maybe have called you out in our game preview on D3Football.com, saying you only had, I think, 3 touchdowns against 5 interceptions coming into this game. Well, today your stats definitely improved. You had 3 touchdowns against 1 interception. What was your feeling coming into this game? I mean, you had 2 wins where your stats weren't lights out, and suddenly today things seemed to step up a notch. What was across the field from you, or what was going on?
I think that I just with the offense and getting more chemistry with the receivers. I mean, they're a good defense, but we couldn't run the ball at the beginning, so we had to throw the ball. That's probably why my stats are so good.
Well, this guy over here, Nick Costello, he kind of came out of nowhere in that second half, 145 yards, receiving 2 touchdowns. You kind of were a team leader, it looked like to me, on the sideline. Was on your sideline for most of the game. What were you telling your team, and how does this feel?
I mean, everyone knew what we had to do, and we just weren't getting it done on offense. So that's what I kept harping on that. I said we just have to – O-line's got to move the D-line, and receivers got to get off the releases and catch the ball. And that's what we did. I mean, the second half we came out running the ball a lot better. Receivers, I think, played really well today. Elijah was putting the ball on the money all day. And, yeah, it felt great today.
Are you feeling more in sync with Elijah now that you're this deep into the season, game 4 basically?
Yeah, I think we've been in sync. I mean, like he said, he's a freshman. It's nerve-wracking coming out here. But I feel like our chemistry's been there since camp, and that's something that's not going to change. So I have all the confidence in the world in him, and I think we just came out here and we put it together perfectly today.
You kind of held it together for, you know, a young guy out here facing a team that had a 0 at the end of their win-loss record after a few games. I mean, did you feel like the intensity was a little amped up for your team and for you personally?
It's a big game because they're undefeated, but I mean, we treat every game the same. It was exciting, came down to the end, but.
Are you guys becoming believers right now? I mean, 2-0 in the MAC. You only have 8 MAC games this season, unlike past years in this kind of modified round-robin play they're doing. I'll ask you first. You're the new kid on the block, and I'll ask the older guy here. Do you feel like, you know, your team has this real chance right now, especially with the Del Val's still to come and whatnot, to win this conference?
Yeah, we think we're capable of getting the MAC championship. Coach has been saying that all year, or since the beginning of the year. We just got to go out and perform and execute.
Nick, give me the same question. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're absolutely capable of it. This is one of the coaches has been saying it all year. This is probably one of the best defenses we've had here in the last 4 years. I mean, our offense, when we're running the ball and when we're throwing the ball like that, I think we're pretty much unstoppable. Yeah, I'm completely confident, and like I said, we just take it. We just got to be 1-0 every week, and that's what Coach harps on, and that's how we've been taking it. So we'll celebrate this tonight, but tomorrow it's watch a film and then it's done with.
Kings up next for these guys. The In the Huddle tradition with player guests is always to give you guys the last word through shout-outs. So, Elijah, you want to go first or second? I'll give you the option on this. He'll go second, he says. Nick, go ahead.
Shout-outs?
Shout-outs to anybody watching.
I mean, just my family if they're watching, I guess. I'm not really sure.
Tell them.
Yeah, shout-out to my family. Thank you guys for following me and everyone who's here today. Appreciate it. You guys go out of your way, and you guys do a lot for me. Thank you.
Okay, you saw how I was done. Now outclass the upperclassmen.
Okay, shout out to my family and all my teammates.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah, shout my teammates know I love them. It's all good.
Well, apparently somebody did better, and it's to my left. Anyway, guys, congratulations. 3-1 best start since 2014 for Lycoming. Enjoy it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, Elijah Shemory and Nick Costello, the freshman quarterback and the wide receiver who has got a little bit more on it. I want to keep saying senior, but I think, is he a junior or senior? I got to check on that as we talk about that in a moment. We'll go to the coach's interview and we'll decipher who's who and what's what. But, you know, with that youth, he seems so timid on film with us, as you could see there. But, you know, his gameplay yesterday was phenomenal against a team that, okay, maybe not a legitimate per se 3-0 juggernaut scenario for FDU Florham, but look, they're 3-0, and they were winning games decently throughout the season. So that was a really big game for a freshman to come out and put up that performance.
Yeah, I think Lyco has been flying under the radar a little bit. I mean, they had the pretty bad loss to Susquehanna early and basically in week 1, and they've now won 3 straight. And you know, Susquehanna had then gone on to beat Johns Hopkins, and they've narrowly lost to Muhlenberg and Franklin and Marshall in successive weeks. So, I mean, it's not necessarily the best way to start off, but Lyco now putting themselves in a position. They don't play Del Val for another couple weeks, but they could potentially, you know, have a shot at running the table here, depending on how things go. And so they're off to a 2-0 start in conference, and you know, it's definitely a team we should keep our eyes on.
Nick Costello is a senior, officially, just checked that. Mike Clark, the head football coach for that Lycoming team, is somebody that I had never met personally before, but loved talking to him. Very nice guy. And he's also their director of athletics there, so he's got a lot of duties there. But he was gracious enough to give us a nice interview here, talk about his team, some of the struggles they've had on offense, and you know how he overcame them in that game, and also what the future of the MAC for his team looks like. This MAC play is in full swing now. They're 2-0 in the MAC. Here it is. Frank Rossi here with Coach Clark. And Coach, great win by your team. A gutty defensive performance at the end there. How was your heart beating during that last, let's say, 5 minutes or so?
You know, Frank, it was beaten pretty good. You know, that was very similar to the loss, the game we lost here 2 years ago. You know, we had gained some control, and then you missed the extra point, and then they hit the trick play, and it's, the momentum definitely swung back in their favor at that point. Brian and his staff do a really good job. I know that his first several years here haven't gone the way that he would want, but those guys to start 3-0, I don't care who you play, it's hard, right? And look, we hadn't beaten a good football team until today. We lost against the best team we played, and then we beat 2 winless teams. And so for us to come on the road against an undefeated team at their play, obviously at their place if we're on the road, but with a noon start, it was, we'll take it. I mean, we're not going to complain, so we feel good about it.
In your 2 wins, your offense hasn't exactly gone lights out, and today it seemed to gel a lot better.
Yeah.
Was that a focus coming into this week for you?
Well, Frank, here's the thing. Our top 2 tailbacks, one didn't dress and because of an injury, and the other left the game with an injury. But we want to run the ball. But they weren't going to let us. They were being really aggressive, and there's a reason they were one of the best, if not the best defense statistically coming into the league. I think we were both top 2 in a lot of categories. But Nick Costello is really good, and so he's hard for people to cover. And so we wanted to utilize Nick and make them defend him. And I think that you can see today, like, look, I've thought for years that he's one of the best receivers in the best receivers in our conference. He's not made an all-conference team yet. He scored 7 touchdowns last year and averaged 17 yards a catch, and there were some good wideouts, but like, this kid has been one of the best receivers in our league for 4 years, and I think that he's just so hard to cover, and we saw that today.
So, Coach, 3-1, best start I think since 2014 or thereabouts for the team. At 2-0 now in the conference, and this conference looks a little topsy-turvy. Is your team beginning to believe that this could be Lyco's year to win the MAC right now?
Well, Frank, our goal is going to be, it was last week and this week, is to remain in first place. We're fortunate that we have an incredibly proud history and tradition, and we've won 15 conference championships in the last 40 years. Unfortunately, the last 3 years have been bad, and our kids have put in an incredible amount of work this offseason. The senior leadership on this team is unbelievable. They've really done a great job of acclimating the new guys in. And Frank, I mean, look, if you look at who we didn't play with today, our best corner didn't play. Again, our top 2 tailbacks were out. One of our 2 best receivers was not dressed today. And we had some freshmen out there. We had some guys out there today who, and I know Brian had some too, but that's what good teams do. And I talked to our guys this week. The Eagles won the Super Bowl last year without Jason Peters and without Carson Wentz and without Darren Sproles. And so nobody's healthy. And we had some guys that were going to step up, and we talked about that. We say all the time, the expectation is for the position, not for the individual. And so I thought we had some guys today that met the expectations for their position and allowed us to win. And so we'll enjoy this today. We'll do our best to correct some mistakes tomorrow, and then we got to find a way to beat Kings going into our bye week. But our goal, we're in first place. We'd like to stay there.
Coach, congratulations. Go enjoy it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, Coach Mike Clark from Lycoming joined me on Saturday at FDU Florham after that win, 27-21. So, let's, as we go through our conference races here, JB, let's start with the MAC. And when you look at it overall right now, you see, Del Val, Lycoming, Stevenson, and wait a minute, must be misprinted my page. It says Misericordia 2-0 in conference here. That can't be right.
That is the truth. That is correct.
Wow.
Yeah, the Cougars have with the wins over Widener and then with Wilkes, they are right up there with some of the usual suspects, you can say. Very an impressive start for them.
And they'll remain undefeated in the conference because they play Castleton next week, as it's an 11-team conference now, so you can't match up everybody. Yep. So they'll play an out-of-conference game against Castleton. Del Val against Stevenson. That's going to be a big game. That's, Stevenson didn't fare very well in week 1, but they've bounced back, obviously. And Del Val obviously had their struggles in week 1 against a better team, Wesley. And now we see this showdown. This is very early in the season for one of these teams to basically be knocked out and probably eliminated from MAC contention with all these teams playing, although not fully out, but it's going to be tough being odd man out at that point. So this is a real highlight game, Del Val and Stevenson coming up on Saturday for sure. Preliminarily, what are you thinking in
given Delville's track record, you have to sort of defer to the defending champs until they get knocked off by somebody. And they handled Stevenson pretty easily last year, if I recall. So I think, initial thoughts go towards the Aggies, but I think it's going to be a much more competitive, closer game than we saw last season.
Not many great matchups next week for the NJAC. Let's look at the records, though. And you've got 4 teams that are 3-0 overall and 2-0 in the conference. That's Frostburg, Wesley, Montclair, and Salisbury. 3 of the usual suspects and Montclair. There's a team right there in Montclair. Do not take your eyes off them. Our Delane Fitzgerald interview, he'll remind you of that same thing, I think, if I remember correctly. But either he just said on camera with us or he said it afterward. Don't ignore Montclair, and I think any team would be a fool to do so this season. Let's go Empire 8 as well here at this point. And, Brockport did not play this week, so you end up with Alfred in the lead technically in the conference, 1-0 right now. But the big game coming up this next week is St. John Fisher at Brockport. Now, St. John Fisher performed well in the second half against Ithaca. And if they can carry that momentum into the Brockport game, it could be a really interesting game. What again, preliminarily, you look at a game like that, it's a 6 p.m. game under the lights. It's the new Courage Bowl, per se, and that's why it's being played in that way. So Courage Bowl is always throw the records out type of game. Do you give Fisher any major chance in this game?
Yes, I do, because I do think that Fisher's defense has proven now to be effective at causing turnovers. They intercepted Wahid Nabi a couple times Saturday. So if they can get to Joe Germanero, maybe cause a mistake or two. We're not really sure what the status of Brockport's run game is now, with the loss of Morrison being out for the season. The St. Lawrence game, Frank, to me, from a week before, doesn't really tell me anything, kind of like the week 1 Hobart game. They played Ithaca tough. Ithaca played Brockport tough. So laws of syllogism, one of our favorite terms on this show, could be a very close game when it's all said and done.
Liberty League, only one game to be played on Saturday, and that is Thomas More visiting St. Lawrence. So let's just look at the standings quickly. There are no conference games that have been played. And RPI and Union right now atop at 4-0 each. Ithaca at 3-1 overall, but their loss was to Brockport. So what were you saying in the background there?
Well, I mean, we know that there are a few Liberty League teams with an open date on the 29th.
Good point. Good point.
Trying to find a game, so maybe there will be a game.
Stay tuned. We'll see what happens with that. Let's go to the CCC up next. And we know that this schedule is about to ramp up big time. And Western New England at Salve Regina at noontime is a huge game for this conference, to say the least. And the interesting thing here is that Salve comes off kind of a game that I would have normally put them as a favorite in against WestCon, but WestCon's one of those anything can happen teams in the MASCAC. But Salve Regina really didn't have the best of performances there, and now they got to turn around and play Western New England. They are 2-2 overall as Salve Regina. Western New England's 3-1 with the loss to Springfield. And, Curry's kind of sitting there after a big loss to Union, watching this game, very interested because if Salve can pull off the upset, it opens things up, I think, for Curry, among others, in this conference. But if Western New England wins it, I'm not giving them the conference necessarily yet, but I think it's more important for Salve to win this game for the conference than for Western New England. Western New England wins this, I think they begin to redominate in this conference.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they obviously didn't have much of a test this past weekend against Anna Maria. They put up almost 600 yards of offense against them. But yeah, this is an opportunity for the Golden Bears to create some separation. So if they can get the win on the road, then they definitely put themselves in the driver's seat. Endicott at Curry, though, Frank, could be interesting too because the Gulls are sort of lurking around. They've gotten this boost of confidence after upsetting Hobart. If they can take Curry out of the equation, then you could maybe see, instead of the traditional Western New England Salve being the 1-2, maybe Endicott moves into that position as the #1 contender.
No conference games in the ECFC, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that a conference game to be played this coming Saturday, maybe the conference title game. It's Husson at SUNY Maritime at 1 o'clock on Saturday. And, I mean, look, SUNY Maritime is a strong team. Husson, without John Smith, has looked decent. Okay, they haven't been the all-powerful Husson this season. If Husson beats SUNY Maritime, I think we've got a kind of a horse race. If SUNY Maritime wins this game, it's kind of like the Western New England scenario I was just talking about. I think them creating separation creates more problems for the conference as a whole than if Husson wins it, because I think Husson may be beatable down the line. Agree, disagree?
No, I definitely agree, and I think the people in Annapolis would love to see the Privateers pull this off, because having a team from near the Bronx to schedule a playoff game with is a lot easier than one from Bangor, Maine. So I think at the national level, there's probably going to be a lot of pro SUNY people, but Husson has won these head-to-head matchups for the last couple of years, so it's going to take a good effort by Thomas Wright and company to dethrone the Eagles.
Looking at the conference standings in the MASCAC, you got 2-2-0s, Framingham State and Mass Dartmouth, and Mass Dartmouth takes on 1-0 Western Connecticut on Saturday. That's an important game to basically see who's going to be the heir apparent to try to take down Framingham State later on in the season, it looks like, right now, the way the standings are forming. Any view here? Smart money normally would be on, and that's an expression, folks, on WestCon being the home team at 5 o'clock, as Mass Dartmouth comes into town. But Mass Dartmouth surprised some folks here by beating Plymouth State, and Plymouth State's a team that's been on par with Western Connecticut in recent times. Where do we go here?
Yeah, I think this will be a close one for sure. The Corsairs definitely have some momentum. I do feel though that the Colonials win over Salve is more impressive though in the grand scheme of things, and gives them a definite edge. So I do think that WestCon has a good shot at going 4-0. And yeah, it's sort of interesting. Here we are only 4 weeks into the season, and Plymouth State, who was a playoff team, is basically out of the running already. So. Tough break for the Panthers from New Hampshire, but it looks like there's a new kid on the block, and that's Western Connecticut.
Finally, NESCAC, Amherst, Trinity, Tufts, and Williams. Amherst and Williams, and you think about that game coming up at the end of the season, and what is it, the biggest little game scenario, basically?
That's what they call it, yeah.
Yep, and right now, those two teams are playing like they want to both be undefeated heading into it, and we'll see what happens there. And looking at the schedule, Trinity plays Williams here on Saturday at 1:30 p.m., so it's a huge game to see if that can materialize, while Amherst plays Bowdoin. Should not be nearly as much of a challenge as we come into Saturday NESCAC play. JB, I think it's time to let folks go live their lives, but first, any words of wisdom before we turn it over to the rest of Facebook at this point?
No, I think what we're starting to see is a little bit of separation. And D3Football.com had tweeted out over the weekend that most of the games these past 2 weekends have been decided by, let's just say, 3 touchdowns or more. And so the very few close games that we've gotten to see are that much more entertaining. But the good news is that we're getting close to one of the 2 key dates that we've talked about in the past, October 6th. And then November 3rd in Week 10. Those are going to be huge weekends, not only for a lot of conference openers, but a lot of rivalry type of games. For some reason this year, the schedules have been flipped over a little bit, so we're going to see some traditional rivalry games happening earlier in the season than we're normally used to. And then, of course, the back half, the last couple weeks of the season always boils down to conference championships and then rivalry trophy games, which could have playoff implications on the line. So we've got an exciting couple weeks of football coming up, and some good matchups to talk about in Week 5. And we have some good interviews coming up for this week, too.
Including our Delane Fitzgerald interview, which will be the first one up. So make sure you go and find that one, especially if you have an open date on Saturday.